Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jerry Giaquinta, Director of Communications for the USA Pavilion at Expo Milano 2015 and Professor at the Marshall School of Business of the University of Southern California. Signore e signori, diamo il benvenuto a Jerry Giaquinta, Direttore di Comunicazione del Pavilione Americano e Professore a USC Marshall School of Business.
Buongiorno. On behalf of the United States Pavilion at Expo Milano, I'd like to welcome you all here for Hollywood and Dine. Hollywood and Dine, is, for many of you that might not know this, is a play on a very famous intersection in Hollywood called Hollywood and Vine. And that's what we're showcasing here. The intersection of the public sector, the private sector, and academia coming together to address the serious challenges of feeding 9 billion people on the planet by 2050. But the important role that entertainment can play in highlighting these issues. So I would like to quickly introduce and briefly introduce some of the people that are making this event happen today. The U.S. Mission in Italy, I'd like to thank Ambassador John Phillips, Consulate General Ambassador Phil Rieker, and also from Sunnyland, Annenberg Retreat, the president of that, Jeff Cowan, and from the Norman Lear Center at USC, Marty Kaplan, my home at USC, and most of all, Norman Lear, who has created such a legend in the United States. Here is a person that has used entertainment and media to use film and stereotype to break down biases and to create discussion and dialogue. And also, I am very pleased to welcome Maria Grazia Cucinotta, who is Expo Ambassador, a fellow Sicilian of mine, and a well-known film star here globally. So with that, thank you very much and welcome. Let the show begin.
Now please welcome to the stage international cinema star and Expo Milano 2015 ambassador, Maria Grazia Cucinotta. Adesso accogliamo sul palco la star del cinema internazionale, nonché ambasciatrice dell'Expo Milano 2015, Maria Grazia Cucinotta.
Buongiorno a tutti, che dire? Quando si parla di cibo, mi interrogano sempre, forse sarà il mio cognome Cucinotta che ricorda la cucina, il cibo. Sono contenta di rappresentare comunque qui in questo argomento che parla appunto di cibo e cinema. Noi siamo cresciuti con i film di Totò, con Miseria e Nobiltà, ci ricordiamo tutti della famosa scena di Totò che mangiava di nascosto gli spaghetti, con lo scarpone di Charlie Chaplin, con Alberto Sordi che faceva l'americano imitando appunto gli americani che mangiavano il cibo americano. Quindi associare sempre il cibo e il cinema è un modo per identificare le nazioni, le città, le regioni, è un modo per identificare la propria cultura. Io vengo dalla Sicilia, quando si parla della mia terra si parla di arancini, di pasta con le vongole, di pesce, perché comunque è un modo per identificare appunto il proprio modo di essere. Quando si parla di America parliamo di questi piatti enormi di hamburger e comunque è un modo carino e giocoso per identificarsi. Poi il cibo è importante, il cibo è vita e quest'anno l'Expo ha dato modo a tutti di poter dare una lezione sul come cominciare un futuro basandosi sul cibo come vita, come modo per migliorare la vita. Io vi auguro una buona giornata e buon divertimento a tutti.
Now please welcome the president of the Annenberg Foundation Trust at Sunnylands and university professor at the University of Southern California, Jeffrey Cowan. Diamo il benvenuto al presidente del Annenberg Foundation Trust a Sunnylands, professore all'Università Southern California, Jeffrey Cowan.
And thank you, Ambassador Cucinotta. It's wonderful to be greeted here by you and also by Jerry Giaquinto, who's done such a remarkable job in putting this together and representing America with all of these ambassadors. There are 60 student ambassadors around, and how proud we are of them who've been part of the American Exposition. And in theater, they call that voice that you hear that's introducing us the voice of God, but he's also known as Mitchell Davis. So Mitch, thank you so much for being our partner in all aspects of this. And I just want to say a word of welcome on behalf of the Annenberg Retreat at Sunnylands, the spectacular home of Walter and Leonore Annenberg, that they left as really a gift to the nation, as a place for high-level meetings, for important dialogues, and this is one of them. It's the place that's best known, really, as the Camp David of the West, where 8 U.S. presidents have spent time, including President Obama, who's had 2 summit meetings there, including the meeting with President Xi Jinping of China, the so-called famous shirt-sleeve summit. So we're really proud on behalf of Sunnylands to be part of this fascinating session. But now it's my great pleasure to be able to introduce the U.S. Ambassador to Italy, my very long-time great friend, and really one of America's treasures, John Phillips.
Thank you, Jeff. Good morning, buongiorno. It's my distinct pleasure also to welcome all of you to this very important conversation. Over the course of 6 months, beginning on May 1st, with over 140 countries participating, millions of people have come to Milan to answer one of the central questions of our time. As we mentioned, how do we feed 9 billion people in the world, on the globe, in 2050. Now, that's an increase of about 3.5 billion people over what we have today. And with all the challenging issues that we face today about climate change and sustainability, I mean, climate change really impacts our ability to produce food, because areas of the globe where food is grown today will not be grown 35 years from now, and there'll be new areas and new opportunities. So the challenges are many. The USA Pavilion theme of America Food 2.0, we're united to feed the world. We seek to highlight the leadership, innovation, and research on food issues. We can't feed 9 billion people without global engagement, and this is central to President Obama's effort to alleviate poverty and hunger around the world. It's also central to Michelle Obama's effort to raise attention to the whole issue of food and gardening and the importance of nutrition and what you eat. And she was here, as many of you know, about 2 months ago, and was a huge hit. And she's one of the very best ambassadors that we have. So along with policy efforts of our USA Pavilion, we are looking to promote American culture and conquer minds through people's stomachs. We want people to know that beyond hamburgers and hot dogs, American cuisine reflects some of the most decorated, innovative chefs today that are working in the United States, including Sherry Yard, who's with us today and a James Beard Award winner many times over. Our American culture is very diverse, and one of America's great exports is entertainment. And we have in this room some of the great exporters of entertainment. Music, movies, and television from the United States have entertained, have influenced, and provided commentary on society as a whole. We learn a great deal about dining from cuisine, from films such as Ratatouille and Chef, and television shows like Seinfeld, The Simpsons, and, of course, Everybody Loves Raymond. With thanks to the Friends of the USA Pavilion, the Annenberg Retreat at Sunnylands, the USC Annenberg Center on Communication, Leadership, and Policy, and the USC Annenberg Norman Lear Center, and Norman Lear, you brought together some of Hollywood's top experts to share their insights into the topic, including Norman Lear, who is truly one of the legends. So thank you for organizing this wonderful program, and I look forward to a fascinating conversation. Thank you.
Does the voice of God introduce me again? Where's my voice of God? Anyway, we're about to have a fascinating conversation. One of the things that we realized at the Annenberg School is that there's really no more important issue for people to think about than the intersection of entertainment with all aspects of life. And this was an insight of Marty Kaplan, who's going to be leading this conversation, and Norman Lear, who totally embraced, in his own career, has been really the quintessential person dealing with those issues, and who has led this effort and helped to create what is called the Norman Lear Center. And of course, we're so privileged to have Norman Lear here with us today. But to lead what will be a fascinating conversation about the relationship of entertainment and food, there's really no better person than an award-winning everything, but Marty Kaplan, who's a professor at USC, who also was a White House speechwriter, who's had many, many roles in life, including being a producer and writer of blockbuster Hollywood films, and runs the Norman Lear Center in an incomparable way. Please join me in welcoming Marty Kaplan. I'm your voice of God.
Thank you, Jeff, for that very kind introduction. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here this morning. Today, we will enjoy some food for the mind, and we will have, I hope, some fun for the spirit. But first, I must tell you that I am sorry to be speaking in English. Ma per prima cosa mi scuso di parlarli in inglese. Molti anni fa, quando ero un giovane studente in vacanza in Italia, mi sono innamorato del vostro paese, della sua gente, della sua bellezza e naturalmente della sua cucina. Ho quindi provato a imparare un po' di italiano, ma mi dispiace dire oggi che ho dimenticato più che quando mi ricordo. Spero che mentre io sono qui, un po' di quello che una volta sapevo tornerà a me. E se stamattina, di tanto in tanto, io sono abbastanza coraggioso o abbastanza stupido da provare a parlare un po' di italiano, io chiedo perdono se vi sembrerò più un bambino piccolo e non molto brillante, che non l'appassionato di questo paese e della sua lingua che sono nel mio cuore. And for those of you who are not Italian speakers, I was asking the audience if there was any young ladies they could fix me up with. This morning, we've turned the iconic corner of Hollywood and Vine into a crossroads that may be less famous, but it's no less iconic, the intersection of Hollywood and Dine. We are so lucky to have the perfect people with us to talk about food and entertainment. Norman Lear, Phil Rosenthal, Sherry Yard, Josh Kuhn, and later on, Madeline Renee. I'm going to ask them to speak and join me in a few moments, but right now, I would just like them to rise so you can welcome them all as a group. Please welcome the panel. Today, we'll be looking at food in media, food in movies, food on television, food in music. But we'll also be looking at food in life. We need food for survival, for life, but we also need food for the enjoyment of life. In fact, in English, there is an intimate connection between food and one of the meanings of the verb to entertain. Here are some books that teach people how to entertain. Look at the pictures on their covers. In English, to entertain can mean to give people pleasure by giving them food. Today, we will consider the image of food in entertainment and the impact of that image. Storytellers love food, wanting it, growing it, preparing it, eating it, not eating it. Food has always been depicted in entertainment and the arts. How is food represented in entertainment? How do storytellers use food in movies, TV, and music? What are its images? What do they mean? How do they make us feel? Per antipasti, to begin to answer that, enjoy this compilation of the image of food in movies from the James Beard Foundation.
You eat in the best restaurants.
All the food groups are represented.
Compliments to the chef.
What is it that you really like to do?
Each.
I think we're all in for a very big treat.
She's really hungry.
Here's one thing I've learned from the movies.
Bring us some fresh wine, the freshest you've got.
That sounds good.
We've been walking a long ways and I was hungry and...
I hope you like chicken and saffron rice served with chocolate sauce.
Burn me a good thick one, Pete.
You ain't as bad as you're cooking, sweetheart.
You ever tried shawarma? Bad dates.
This way, Grandpa.
Good.
There's just a flutter of like a nutty Edam cheese.
Leave the gun. Take the cannoli.
As God is my witness, I'll never be hungry again.
Those images, those stories bring back so many memories. What is the impact of those images and stories on us? I raised this question about impact, not only about images of food in entertainment, but about all the images that storytellers show and tell us. And I raise it not only about movies, TV, and music, but about all forms of entertainment, from literature to theater to video games. Does entertainment shape our desires? Does it change our behavior? Do we learn about the world from it? Does entertainment have power over us? Some may find it strange to think that entertainment has an impact. After all, it's fiction, it's an illusion, a performance, it's imagined, it's not real. But as all of us can attest from our own experience, entertainment does have an impact. Stories and characters can affect what we know, what we feel, what we believe, even what we do. Entertainment can change the world in ways both small and big. For example, consider the novel Uncle Tom's Cabin, a best-selling book in the United States in the 19th century. It was popular entertainment, but it also helped put an end to slavery. When Abraham Lincoln met its author, Harriet Beecher Stowe, he is said to have told her, "So, you're the little woman who wrote the book that started this great war." Don Draper and Joan Harris are fictional characters in the TV series Mad Men, played by John Hamm and Christina Hendricks. But Mad Men changed what some non-fictional men wear. And Mad Men changed what some non-fictional women did to their bodies. Plastic surgeons in Britain say the rising demand for breast enlargement is due in part to Mad Men. I know from personal experience about the potential of entertainment to change behavior. Earlier in my career, I wrote and produced a movie for Disney called The Distinguished Gentleman. In this scene, Eddie Murphy has been drinking, and Cheryl Lee Ralph doesn't want him to drive.
Well, as I live and breathe. Hey, cuz.
Hey, oh, I'm sorry. This is Miss Loretta Hicks from my staff. This is Congressman Hawkins.
Pleasure to meet you.
Oh, would you like a drink?
You know, you two look like you could use a designated driver.
Oh, good Samaritan. Praise them.
A designated driver. When you go out with friends, one person stays sober so no one drives drunk. The makers of many TV shows and movies, including me, wrote designated drivers into scenes because starting in the 1980s, the Harvard Alcohol Project spread the word that entertainment could help prevent deaths. To use the power of entertainment to serve society. There's a name for this, entertainment education, which leads to the question, can entertainment educate audiences about food? To answer that, I want to tell you a story. This is the Los Angeles headquarters of the Writers Guild of America. It's a union. If you're a writer in Hollywood, if you write for television or the movies, you belong to it. From time to time, members come here to discuss industry topics like contracts and negotiations, but sometimes writers come here for a different reason. They come in search of new stories to tell. They come to ground their stories in reality, to learn about problems that people struggle with. to hear from experts about research, to be informed and inspired. One night, there was a panel discussion at the Writers Guild about food and health. It was called, "What is Really Killing You, and Can You Prevent It?" Can you prevent diseases like cancer and diabetes through diet and exercise? Writers love to learn about life and death. That's what so many stories are about. This is one of the speakers from that night, Dr. Lorelei DeSogra, director of the U.S. government's campaign to get Americans to eat at least 5 portions of fruit and vegetables each day. Here's what she said to the screenwriters.
What's really killing you, one of the things that's really killing you and killing most of America is the foods that people are eating. They're eating too much food, too many calories, too much fat, too much sugar.
How did it happen that some of America's most successful screenwriters spent an evening learning from experts about 5 a day and fast food and disease? Do you know the show ER? How did it happen that this scene appeared in ER?
I just get a little winded climbing the stairs. It's no big deal.
You remember Dr. Pratt, right?
What's up, man?
You've been taking your hydrochlorothiazide? Why not?
Because you told me if I exercise a little more, I'll feel better.
No, I said you could stop taking it in 6 months if you exercise, lost some weight, and ate more fruits and vegetables.
Is that dinner?
Cheeseburgers.
Yeah. My mother's working tonight, and I have to pick up the kids from Miss Johnson at 7.
Wet crackers to the apex. He's in pulmonary edema. Hey, I know you. You're Pratt's patient, right? Hey, Pratt, I think this one's yours.
Pulse ox is 78.
He needs LASIK.
Hey, 40 in the field. What's going on?
17-year-old with pulmonary edema.
Belgian?
We need a nitro spray.
Had 2 in the field. You want an intubation tray? What? No. He's just got a little hypertension.
What he has is a little congestive heart failure. Start a nitro drip at 40 mics and 25 sublingual captopril.
Stats are dropping to low 80.
And Page Cardiology, we need a stat echo down here now.
Never seen a kid this young in heart failure before.
So, what did we learn from all this? 5 a day, exercise some, and find myself a job at a vegetable stand or something like this. Good man.
Or how did it happen that these Hollywood writers and producers spent a day in low-income parts of Los Angeles where they had never been, meeting people, turning beer and fast food stores into markets selling fresh fruit and vegetables, and meeting students growing their own gardens and learning healthy cooking habits? How did that happen? This is the Writers Guild of America East in New York. How did it happen that these comedy writers spent an afternoon learning from experts and other writers about climate change and sustainable agriculture? Who cares if Hollywood cares about health? The answer is Hollywood Health and Society, a program of the Norman Lear Center at the University of Southern California's Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism. I'm a professor at USC and the founding director of the Norman Lear Center. The center began in the year 2000 thanks to a generous gift from Lynn and Norman Lear. The idea behind the Lear Center, the idea behind Hollywood Health and Society and all the center's work is that entertainment has power. The power to hold up a mirror to us and show us who we are. The power to imagine other possibilities and other realities. The power to affect what we know, what we believe, and what we do. The power to reach us and teach us and change us. Hollywood Health and Society is a free service to the entertainment industry. Since we began, our major funder has been the U.S. government's Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Like the CDC, we cover not only food issues like obesity, diabetes, and heart disease, but the whole range of public health issues, from smoking and HIV/AIDS to malaria and violence. Hollywood doesn't have to be accurate, but we try to make it as easy as possible for Hollywood to know what's accurate and to be inspired by true stories about real people. How does Hollywood Health and Society do that? As you saw, we hold panel discussions at the Writers Guild. We take writers on research trips. We hold screenings of documentary films. We bring in experts. We invite screenwriters whose scripts tell public health stories to say why and how they wrote them. We connect screenwriters with the best experts anywhere to answer their questions so that they can get it right in their scripts. Each year, we give the Sentinel for Health Award. It shines a spotlight on entertainment that's accurate and that motivates viewers to make choices for healthier and safer lives. We also do research. This morning, you'll be the first to hear about some new research we've done about the image of food on television and about the impact on audiences of satirical news about food. But first, I want to introduce you to our amazing guests. And I'm going to start. I asked Norman Lear, who is my hero and the most important producer in the history of television, and it is not an exaggeration in the U.S. And so many, Archibaldo, All in the Family, Maude, and so many others. And I asked him, so how can I introduce you? What would you like me to say about you? And he said, it's very simple. Why don't you just show, and he told me a certain scene from a certain show that he produced. So I'm going to show you that scene.
Mary Hartman! Mary Hartman!
Oh.
Mary, hi.
Hi, Blanche. I heard Leroy was sick, so I brought over some chicken soup that I made.
Isn't that nice? Come on in, come on in.
Thanks.
You hear that, Leroy? Mary brought you over some chicken soup.
I don't like chicken soup.
Oh, go on, Leroy. Everybody likes chicken soup.
I don't.
Everybody means everybody. And that means you. And besides, it's the best thing you can take for a cold.
I don't have a cold. I've got the flu.
Oh, well, they say it's even better for that.
Wrong, Mary. They say a shot of booze is the best thing for the flu.
Leroy, I told you, they say you have to feed a cold.
Well, those who are really in the know say that the best thing for the flu is chicken soup.
Now, those who really know, they say that sleep is the best thing for the flu.
Seconal? Oh, no. Seconal and liquor? Seconal and liquor are very bad together. You should never have that together.
My cough has been waking me up every night this week.
Well, that's why, Leroy, you should have some chicken soup. Blanche, yes. Get me a big bowl. Get me a really big bowl.
Right.
Okay? Now, you listen to me, Leroy Fetters. Liquor and sleeping pills are very bad for you. Chicken soup is very good for you. Chicken soup is good for anything that ails you. It may not be good for, like, if you're bleeding internally or broken bones, but it's good for anything else that ails you. Now, do you understand that?
Who is the they that says that, Murray? Mary. Who?
An entire ethnic group, Leroy. The whole Jewish people. And they ought to know. I mean, they practically invented chicken soup. And an incredible amount of those people are doctors.
Here you go, Mary.
Ah, okay, now. Here you go, Leroy. Now, I'm not going to give you that much vegetable because it's the soup part that's really important, that goes right, right into your cold. You know what I mean? I mean, the vegetable part is good for you. I mean, that builds, like strong muscles and strong body, but you already have a strong body. So it's this liquid part. Now, you see this, Leroy? See this liquid part right here? It's very important that this liquid part here just gush. We just want it to gush right up into your brain and into where all those little cold cells are, and we want it to find those cold cells, and we want it to get rid of your cold.
Leroy, will you pay attention? Mary's talking to you.
Hey, Mary.
Hi, Leroy. Listen, Leroy, what you do is you take this spoon now, and you just slurp up this soup, and I promise you that you are going to feel great in a matter of minutes. Okay? Now, Blanche and I, Leroy, Blanche and I are going to go into the living room, and we're just going to have a nice little talk. Come on, Blanche. Now, you finish that soup, Leroy. And I'm just going to tell you one thing. If you don't drain that bowl within 5 minutes, I am never going to prescribe for you again.
You know, he's a terrible patient. Terrible.
Well, most men are. I think it's because they're not women. I mean, women have built-in pain, They get cramps once a month and labor when they have a baby. And men, I mean, what do men get? They get maybe a little burning sensation, a heartburn. Of course, they do have the army.
I never thought of that.
Really? See, I think about those things all the time. But of course, I read a lot. I mean, we have delivered to the house. We have 3 magazines a week delivered to the house. Oh. And I read those. And then I buy about 3 magazines at the Federated, and I read those, so that makes like 6 magazines. And Tom always says that he's afraid that one of these days the house is going to sink down because, I have so many magazines in this that I never get rid of after I finish reading.
I think you must be a very informed person, Mary. I mean, who else would know about Jewish people and chicken soup?
Well, most guilty people. Or, if you watch Johnny Carson, he has a lot of comedian. He has a lot of characters on that show, and you get a whole ethnic education on that show. I mean, like, for example, did you know this? Did you know that more Italian people eat spices and less Italian people get heartburn than any other people?
Oh, I can't stay awake from Johnny Carson.
Oh, really? Oh, well. Blanche, you are missing an entire education. He has just everything on there. I mean, he has cultural events, and he has, the latest gossip about the Gabor sisters, and Leroy? Leroy?
Leroy! Oh, God.
Leroy, have you finished it yet?
Leroy, that's no way to eat chicken soup. Where are your manners? Oh, look at this mess.
Leroy? Leroy. Blanche. Blanche. Leroy has drowned. Leroy has drowned in a bowl of my chicken soup. I have actually taken a human life with my chicken soup.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Norman Lear and our panelists. And all of our panelists, please. Yes. Norman, you're right there. And Phil, you're next to Norman. And Sherry next to Phil. And Josh over there.
I don't know about you, but I love Betsy.
So
that was a show that was on 5 days a week. It was at 11 o'clock at night. It was a spoof on soap operas.
When I saw that, I had two thoughts. One is, you are bad. You're a bad person to have done that. And the other is, what were you thinking when you did that?
I was thinking, wouldn't it be funny if Coach Fetters died in a bowl of chicken soup?
He was a regular character, right?
He was a regular character.
So you killed a cast member.
Following that, no. He was gone.
And it suggests that chicken soup has some place in your own memory.
Well, as Mary Hartman indicated, chicken soup is the Jewish solution or cure for everything. So I grew up in a family in a broad family, where chicken soup was ordered for every illness. You had chicken soup.
And was your mother a terrific cook?
My mother was as bad a cook as existed. But other people said, oh, she's one. That's the way it was. Poor cooks were considered, if they worked hard enough or talked about working hard enough, they were great.
Phil, you're nodding. Was your mother also a bad cook?
The worst. I put my mother up against your mother. Anytime, yeah.
I'll put my mother up against your mother.
They deserve each other, I think.
Sherry, were you also nodding?
I am nodding because my mother actually opened up a really great can. And at one point for Thanksgiving, she told my father, put the vegetables in the oven. And he did, but never opened the can. And cream corn went blasting by my grandmother while she was peeling a little crudité and hit the plate glass window. So,
wow.
Yeah, that's pretty.
My father used to say that when they were first married, their apartment was where the cockroaches came to commit suicide.
So, Josh, are you going to defend your mother's cooking?
Well, I think, I'm the most well-adjusted up here. And as a result, my mother is a great cook.
So
That's
it worked
right.
out.
It worked out.
Now, I haven't asked about any of your fathers being cooks.
Oh, that's quite sexy.
Also a great cook,
Yes.
my father.
No, he was worse. Yeah.
Worse, I see. Did he ever go in the kitchen?
He could make soup from a can.
From a can.
That's it.
And Norman, is the idea of your father cooking?
He never cooked. Our kitchen was the site of argument upon argument. I came from a family that lived at the top of their voices, the end of their nerves, and they fought. My mother and father fought endlessly, and I used to sit with a pad and pencil and rate them. It's the only way I could handle it, was to make some kind of fun just for myself. But they would have these violent arguments over meals, and the kitchen was a prize ring.
So the idea that the kitchen is a space of love and comfort and togetherness.
Well, that in my home was love and comfort.
How about you?
Am I alone? Did nobody ever hear arguments in the kitchen?
You hear everything in the kitchen. The kitchen is the central meeting place of the family. So if there's rancor, if there's arguments, it's going to be there. If there's love and affection, it's probably going to be there too.
It all took place.
It's all there.
And that makes it especially good for storytelling.
Yeah. That's where the stories get told. The stories of the day. How was your day? It's around the meal. And it's always been that way.
And Sherry, again, you're nodding?
I'm nodding because my father was a New York City fireman. I grew up in Brooklyn. And the firehouse was some of the best food I've ever eaten in my life. You know, firemen, they cook all day, they go shopping, and if there isn't a fire, they're cooking. So my mom never really cooked because she couldn't keep up.
And
you know, I'm jealous of these stories of stories in the kitchen and stories over meals. We ate most of our meals fittingly in front of the television and would eat in silence watching The Love Boat. That was, you know, we're kind of the perfect family for you guys, you know? Just giving us the stories.
Not if you're watching The Love Boat.
Hey. That was my idea of internationalism.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
was your family any the worse because you didn't talk to each other at meals?
No, I think as a result, I'm well adjusted. We didn't speak to each other, and it worked.
He might be onto something.
So I did earlier introduce very briefly Norman Lear, and you have with you, I hope, biographies which tell about all of our panelists, but I also want briefly to say something else about each of our panelists. And so I'd like to just introduce Phil to you. He is the creator of the show Everyone Loves Raymond, which was on for 9 years, which in television is a triumph. Your shows were on those many years, which is a miracle. I mean, 3 episodes now is a miracle, let alone 9 years. And Phil is himself, he is a writer of comedy. He has been a performer of comedy. And when I asked him how we could introduce him to you, he mentioned a scene around the dinner table in Everyone Loves Raymond. So I'd like to show that to you also. Oh no, wrong video.
Jiggles.
Yeah, that's the sign of a good bean curd bird.
May I have my carving knife, please?
Thank you, Frank.
I want to slit my throat.
All right, I got it. All right, what do you want?
Give me a leg.
Okay. Oh. Here's your choices. We got the light over here. We got dark, where the food coloring has puddled.
All right, just give me It's not food coloring. It's Worcestershire and beet juice.
Oh, see, that's very clever.
Why didn't you bring your dog, Robert?
I don't think Shamsky would eat this.
Yeah, but we could eat him.
Go ahead, Robbie. Try some.
What about Raymond?
I had some already.
No, you didn't.
Yes, I did.
No, you didn't.
I did. I did. From right here, you can't tell because it morphs back.
All right, all right. We are all eating some. Frank. Swallow it. Ray. Go ahead, Robert.
I never thought I'd say this, but could you pass the broccoli, please?
We'll come back to this photo later.
Okay.
To explain what that expression of pure pleasure was about.
That was a tofu turkey. She was trying to be healthy for the family, and she thought, you know, having seen your programs at the Writers Guild, that she would eat healthy. They had high cholesterol, and so they went overboard. And I don't recommend tofu turkey to anybody.
When you did that, did you in fact have any sense that people watching it might relate to the situation of needing to deal with high blood pressure? And
Absolutely. I thought it was a relatable topic, and I also thought that there's nothing more universal than tasting something terrible.
When you were growing up, was the issue of what is healthy food and not healthy food, was that part of your family's life?
We were just trying to survive. We were just trying to get through a meal without... I say this in my other show now, that in our house, meat was a punishment. It was a very cheap grade of meat always, and it was gray and chewy, and I wasn't allowed to leave the table until I finished. So it was hard on my jaws, it was hard to taste, it was, and I remember storing it in my cheeks and pretending I was finished and then going and spitting it out later. Yeah.
And you got away with that?
A little bit, yeah.
Norman, is the idea of good food or bad food, is that something that you grew up with?
We, in my generation, have you noticed I'm a little older than Phil? And
Signor Lear, ha 93 anni. Davvero. Davvero.
What did the man say?
I said you were 32.
I heard it. In my generation and in my house, we were not talking about all food was good for you, and you had to finish everything because children in India are starving. You know, my mother had said something like that. If there was anything left in the plate, there were kids around the world that were starving. You finished that.
I would say, please send it to them.
So I grew up finishing everything, and it was not good.
So a clean plate was a sign of respect for world hunger.
Yes, and it was also a sign that you loved your mother's cooking.
Which she cared about.
Which she cared about.
Not enough to learn how to cook.
God forbid.
Where were the children hungry when you grew up?
Where did you say? India?
India in his case.
Yeah, that's good, yeah.
Was that what? Did someone in your family say eat up? There are children in India who were starving?
Or somewhere in the world. Yeah, I don't remember. I didn't care about them. I thought they were lucky.
To not be eating your mother's cooking. Yes. Yes, exactly. So, speaking of cooking, sitting next to Phil is Sherry Yard. Sherry is a chef and one of America's finest. She started out as a pastry chef, and she remained a pastry chef, but at the same time, she became a food executive working for Wolfgang Puck, and for 20 years, she was running the business side and executive chef for Wolfgang Puck in his many restaurants. And her career includes very famous moments in the life of Hollywood as a working city. So what I'd like to do now is show you a brief video about Sherry.
Sherry Yard was born and bred in Brooklyn and began her culinary career at New York's venerable Rainbow Room.
Sugar and spice and all things nice.
She flew west to San Francisco to Campton Place, followed by a move to Los Angeles to work with Wolfgang Puck. For nearly 30 years, Yard has embraced a range of responsibilities, from creating savory and sweet menus to opening new restaurants, all while mentoring the next generation of chefs in restaurant kitchens around the world, and as a driving force of the Careers Through Culinary Arts program. After nearly 20 years with Wolfgang Puck and many accolades, including 2 James Beard Awards, Yard now serves as Vice President of Culinary Development for the iPick Entertainment Group, and in late 2014 will revive the iconic Helms Bakery.
Sherry, I was reading an article that had an interview with you in it, and you were speaking of what in my mind is part of the theater of dining. You were talking about how your grandmother would set the table.
Oh, yes.
Would you talk about that?
My grandmother was a turned-down maid at the Waldorf Astoria, and her brother...
A turned-down maid. She
Yes.
would go into the rooms and turn down for nighttime.
In the afternoon and evening. And her brother was a bellhop. And as time went along, talk about the American dream, he became the general manager of the Waldorf Astoria in time. And so in our home, while we didn't have a lot of money, but my grandmother had Czechoslovakia and China, and beautiful stemware. And we would drink strawberry soda that she would make with fresh strawberries and egg sandwiches on this beautiful Limoges. And so it wasn't just about nutrition, but it was about the pageantry of it and getting dressed a certain way just to sit at the table and tell stories. So I was very blessed.
And the restaurants you have worked in, with, and for are, they think pageantry is an important part of dining.
Which is what attracted me to the Rainbow Room in the first place. Just the idea of...
Describe the Rainbow Room.
Oh, goodness. A Rainbow Room. I just don't even know where to begin. I opened the Rainbow Room, I think it was 1986, 85, 86 or so. And there we had 2 live bands. We had an orchestra, we had a Latin group orchestra, and a big band. And we had Tony Bennett singing in one room in the Rainbow and Stars side. And it just felt like Forrest Gump. You know, I relate so much of my life to being the fly on the wall, you know, peering out of the kitchen as the McGuire sisters sang, or Rosemary Clooney was there, and to watch, you know, the 300 guests could sit and dine and then dance, and just such great restaurateurs. Joe Baum, who ran the Rainbow Room, he, for one day, closed the restaurant, took an ad out in the New York Times, and put the ad in, and it was a hand, and it was a gentleman's hand, and it was holding a bouquet of flowers. The bouquet had all of our names in the bouquet, and it said, to honor the best staff in New York City, we closed the restaurant. And they had the Moscow Circus, and they had all these, the four tops, and they had all these wonderful people performing for us. And to this day, I've never been a part of such grandeur, just such, the lobsters and the oyster Rockefeller Towers, and just so great. So it was really natural that I eventually make my way to be, with Wolfgang. I just yearned for that.
And also, just because not everyone may know it, the location of the Rainbow Room.
Yes. Avenue of the Americas and Fifth Avenue on 50th Street or so. 50th Street. Oh, on the 64th floor.
The 64th floor.
And what most people don't know is that when you're cooking, you're on the 63rd floor. And then the food is on the 64th floor. And I would have to that's one of my first jobs as a pastry chef. First I started in the pantry doing oyster Rockefellers and shucking oysters. And then I got a promotion. First job actually was a cigarette girl. Then I got promoted from the cigarette girl to the pantry to pastry, and I had to make soufflés. And the soufflés needed to be able to be so perfect that they could go across a room, up an escalator, and then through the dining room. So it was quite a feat. It was a lot of fun.
In that same Rainbow Room, for 6 years, we had the Business Enterprise Awards, which took place on a weekday morning at 7:30 in the morning. They seated about 240 people.
Yep.
Describe the Business Enterprise Awards.
It was a group of major executives, Warren Buffett among them, that's the name everybody would recognize, who gathered together to honor companies that were good, that were doing well by doing good. They were good for 360 degrees of their constituents. The people who worked for them, the people they sold to, the people they dealt with, et cetera, et cetera. It took place, President Clinton addressed us one morning, the First Lady addressed us another time, Diane Sawyer was a moderator. But what was the kick of kicks was it took place at 7:30 on a weekday morning, and the room was full of major corporate executives honoring businesses that, as I said, were doing well by doing good.
And that was the second breakfast of their day.
Could have been.
So,
isn't that ironic, though? I was in the kitchen and we didn't even meet. Yes, in the kitchen, yeah. Eventually we're meant to meet, yeah.
So the idea of people in business doing well and doing good, want to look at the entertainment industry that way. It is said that entertainment, before it's anything else, is a business, and the most important thing is box office or ratings. In your career, you were extremely successful. You had, what, 4 out of the 5 top shows in the country?
Well, 6 out of 10, but who's counting?
6 out of 10. And that was when a show was watched by 50 million people. Now only a global sporting event, soccer and football, get those kinds of audiences. And they were watching you and your shows all week long, basically. And what did you think the impact of your shows was, if any, on audiences? Were they simply having a good time?
Well, they were having a good time. I didn't understand as we went along. And it was years and years later when we were working so hard, I wasn't thinking about what the show might have been doing out there, what its effect was. But I began to learn from all the letters and so forth that people talked afterwards. They saw, and this happened with Raymond too, they saw an episode and the family discussed the episode. First of all, they were watching together. There were 3 networks at that time. They all watched together, the family watched together. There weren't 6 sets in the home. It was largely 1 set in the living room, everybody watched. So it was an entirely different time. But I think you'd be interested to know, and this was not prepared. we read the newspapers and paid attention to what was going on in our families and derived the notion of what we would deal with in our episodes. What would the subject matter be from all of that? Somebody came in one day and said there was an article in the New York Times that the incidence of hypertension in black males was going up and it was far above white males. Well, we had Good Times on the air, and that was a perfect subject.
For those who don't know, Good Times.
It was a black family living in the projects in Chicago. And John Amos was a major figure in that show. He was the father. And we did an episode about the hypertension in black males. He was concerned that he had read it was elevating, and he was an example of it. When the show ended, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of telephone calls to the local stations where it appeared around the country, asking a question: what could we do? What could we do? There was no preparation, so there was no answer. But by the time there was a rerun, that first episode might have gone on in October. In May or June, they were rerunning the episode, and they knew what was coming. So they took out some time, either from the commercials, unlikely, or the show, and they gave some information. If you are concerned about hypertension in black males, call this number. That's one of the times we learned the effect of what we were doing. And that's when health messages became important to us. And we went out of a way to think that way and deliver those.
So, Phil,
I just want to say,
yes,
thank you. I'll get to you in a second. But what makes this man so great and so important in history is that before All in the Family in 1970, sitcoms were not dealing with issues that were taken from what was happening in the real world. And what Norman was able to do through entertainment, which is the theme today, is present these topics. I'm talking about criticism of the government. I'm talking about issues like rape and abortion and transsexuality years before it became the thing to do. With wit and intelligence and caring about the world and the people in the world. And this was unprecedented, and that's why this is a very important person sitting here.
That statement deserves a little applause.
Yes, it does. I don't know if they understand what I'm saying. No, a lot.
A lot of applause.
No, but it's important, and I always say to Norman that all those things were historic and fantastic, and we wouldn't have taken them to heart or learned anything if they weren't presented through brilliant storytelling. The story is the sugar that makes the medicine go down, right? And that's why he's a genius. So I just needed to say that.
Well, I'm always happy to hear that said about Norman. But let me ask you about, in your own work, has the idea of how an audience would respond to things, what you could bring in the way of issues, has that been part of your own work?
I never felt I was smart enough or in tune enough to handle the political issues, the heavy social issues of the world, the timely issues. So what I tried to do, what I felt was in my wheelhouse, was to work on the timeless issues that Norman dealt with, meaning the personal relationships and behavior, human behavior issues, especially of a family, right? And that's what I could take from Norman and try to emulate
Well, you didn't take from Norman, you took from Phil Rosenthal. But you've seen Everybody Loves Raymond here, because I know I've been with Phil in a couple of places where everybody seemed to understand it. Am I correct? Have you seen, this audience, have you seen much of that show?
I don't know. Yeah. I see some Americans here. Yeah, good. Hi, kids.
And speaking of kids,
yeah,
Josh, you are a professor. You are in
Speaking of kids.
When you talk to your students, when you're teaching and working with them, what is your sense of the impact of entertainment on them?
Well, I think especially this generation of students, we're talking anywhere from 18 to 22-year-olds, entertainment is not entertainment. Entertainment is their life. That there's really no aspect of their life that is not defined by, saturated with, completely shaped by entertainment content, but also entertainment networks. It's really the first generation of students that I've taught for whom, they've grown up not just digital natives, but I think you could say kind of entertainment natives, where every device, every bit of technology that they use is both a communication technology, email and texting, but it's also their primary entertainment source. This is where they stream television content, it's where they stream film content. In fact, there's no division between TV, film, music videos, YouTube videos. It's just all stuff that streams. It's all on their phone that they watch during my classes, let me say. So I think there's no separation, which means there's no better time, I think, in the world to talk about entertainment as a social media in that broader sense than right now.
And what is your sense of, that's what they do, what is the impact of it on them?
Well, I think it depends. I think, some of them are, in a way, it's a constant stream of content. One of the ways I think about it a lot is that it, on the one hand, has produced what I think about as a kind of horizontal consciousness, which is they actually lack a lot of historical consciousness, is one of the things I try to bring back. So everything, it could be a song from 1920, an episode of All in the Family, an episode of Raymond, and a new Netflix episode, and it all exists on the same plane, and they can grab it with the same ease, and so there's no context. A lot of, I think, entertainment now comes down to young viewers without context, without the surrounding metadata, if you will. Now, on the other hand, that means that they have more access to a diversity of content, and they are more exposed to global entertainment, to content from all over the world, and so they're really privileged in that way, and really have a gift of a kind of awareness of global media, of internationalism. And I think the challenge for educators, the challenge for content creators, is to play with both of those pros and cons, to understand the lack of context, but also understand the great possibility.
So in a little while, I'm going to ask Josh to talk a little bit about his own work, which includes, he curated an exhibit, extremely popular and successful, that's on now in Los Angeles, called To Live and Dine in LA, which is based on the library, the public library's collection of 13,000, is that the number?
Yes.
13,000 menus, and using those menus to do a social and cultural and culinary history of Los Angeles.
Menus that go back to the 18th century.
To the earliest restaurants. And so I'm going to ask Josh later to talk about that at length.
Sure.
But what I'd like to do now, and just bring into the conversation, earlier we saw a compilation of moments in movies involving food. And I wanted to give equal time to television. And so this is a compilation that we at the Lear Center did in order for today to show the TV side.
Gee, I hate mush. I'm fed up with mush. Ain't you, Sparky? You said a mouthful. Pork chops and applesauce. Ain't that swell? Kiss my grit.
So what do you say? Shall we eat?
Let's see.
You see, Mama and Iola are in the kitchen because cooking is what they're good at.
This breakfast is good enough to eat. Oh my God, that smells good.
I think it's a lamb ragu.
Holy
Nothing here. It's vegetarian.
Be a good girl, Tina, and eat your supper.
Now you can either come to the table and eat, or you can lie there and feed off your own fat. Dinner should be special, not at the dinner table.
Let's say grace.
I'll do it this time.
What?
Shut up. Hey, man.
Grow up. Excuse me, I am grown up. That's why I cooked all this food. I love what I made.
We're not gonna eat this dreck anymore! We want something else!
You're cooking. You can really taste the ignorance.
It's pronounced anchovies.
I guess you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs, am I right?
Fly, be free!
How's it taste?
Best.
You mind, Wait and watch!
Oh, wow. Cheesecake.
Got carrots for your eyes. Got beets for your blood. Everything's good for something on this plate.
Oh, little pizza ain't good for nothing.
You mean you're still on that diet?
Oh, you hate my sensible meal. You hate my sensible meal.
And I literally ate 15 mini muffins.
That man ate all our shrimp and 2 plastic lobsters.
I'm feeling hungry today.
Are you through with your dessert?
Yeah, I'll go ahead, Pickles. You're not gonna eat this?
Never seen anyone eat that fast.
I was afraid to put my hands near her mouth.
This is almost better than sex.
2 cups of good, hot, black coffee.
I just want you inside of me.
It's the best bloody peanut butter I've ever tasted.
I will cook you!
There's been an accident.
Why tear this family apart?
So, how about that guacamole?
I know, I'm terrible. Making you eat ice cream.
Should we order?
Yeah. The f are the specials?
If we could just see the menus, please.
Nothing for you.
This is local?
This is ham, soaked in rum.
Do we want another round? What do you think?
4 more, please.
Coming right up.
So I'm going to ask each of you just for any reaction to any part of what you just saw.
I'm hungry.
Well, how could, I mean, it seems so ubiquitous eating. We do it every day, more than once a day. So of course it's going to be represented in film and television. It's an essential part of the human experience, you know? And it's a little more exciting than showing sleeping.
As you watched it, do you recall any of those specific scenes?
Yeah, almost all of them. Yeah. I like food, I like eating, and so when I see characters that I love, or even characters that I don't know yet, eating, I relate to it, I wonder what they're eating and how I can get some.
Phil and food. I mean, as has been mentioned before, on PBS starting in a few weeks, Phil has 8 episodes, Eating Around the World. The title of the show is called I'll Have What Phil's Having. So,
and this is a photo of Phil having gelato, yes?
Gelato's very good. I don't know if you've heard of this.
Where, that's in Florence, right?
This is my favorite one in Florence. It's a place called Vivoli. Do you know Vivoli? Do you know Vivoli? It's my favorite. Where's the best in Milan? Where should I go? So many?
Go to Rome. Go to Sicily.
But Grom I have in Los Angeles. I do. It's fantastic.
Massimo.
Excellent.
Today.
Massimo del Gelato.
We're going today, right after this.
I want you all to join us.
Yeah.
How about we continue this at Massimo Gelato?
Yeah.
Sherry?
You're saying no?
Yeah.
You have an opinion? Let's have a fight. What do you say?
It's good.
This is why I love Italy, because I see the passion with which you state your opinion, because this is not just something I think, this is something I feel. This is something I love, and you're wrong.
We will return to your restaurant recommendations, which will be the most important part of our
Come
conversation
on, look how we
today.
came alive.
Sherry, as you were watching that?
Well, you know, I always like to say you taste with your eyes first, whether the plate is just coming in front of you and now on the screen. So to me, it's so inspiring and exciting that, and for me, growing up Julia Child on television and the cooking shows, it's always been inspiration for me, so it's exciting.
And Josh?
I mean, I echo what everybody has said already, but the other thing I was thinking about is my wife is from Mexico, grew up just south of the U.S.-Mexico border with direct access to U.S. television and U.S. cinema every single day. And one of the things she always says to me is that she and her sisters were always amazed at how on U.S. TV there were so many food fights. And that they were very struck that in Mexico you rarely would see people throwing food around and wasting food. But Americans seem to love throwing food at each other in our media. And that's always stuck with me. Yeah, exactly. But I also wanted to say, and I don't know, Marty, if I'm jumping the gun here, but there's also a really interesting corollary of all of this in music, right? So I do a lot of writing and teaching about popular music, and of course, songs about food are, you know, volumes and volumes and volumes.
And when you came in today, this music that you heard was curated by Josh.
And the playlist is on Spotify. You can go to the Lear Center website and find the playlist and create your own.
Food, songs about food.
Songs about food.
Phil's show was just mentioned, and I want to come back to that. But I also mentioned earlier that there is some new research that I wanted to tell you about. So there are two pieces. I'm going to tell you about one of them now, and we'll do another one later. But it seemed like a good time to do that. And this is about the image of food on television. So if we could cue up the beginning of that. There. The food we see on TV. Starting in 2004, the Lear Center's Hollywood Health and Society program has been studying the top 10 shows on each of the 5 broadcast networks in the U.S. For Expo Milano, we looked into our data to see what we could learn about food in the most popular series on American TV. Today, we're releasing some new findings about the image of food on TV based on analyzing more than 1,300 of those episodes. We wanted to find out how often food like fruits and vegetables were shown on series and how often they showed sugary foods like candy and desserts. Here's what we found. We see food in about 8 out of 10 episodes on TV. It's everywhere. And when we do see food, we are just as likely to see fruits and vegetables as we are to see sweets and desserts. So, if you are watching the most popular TV series in America, you would see something from the It's Good For You food group in about 1 out of every 3 episodes, and you'd see something from the I Deserve a Treat food group also in 1 out of 3 episodes. We also wanted to find out what kind of food the characters in TV actually eat. We wanted to know how often actors are shown eating fruits and vegetables, and how often they're eating sweets and desserts. It turns out that we see characters eating sweets more often than we see characters eating fruits and vegetables. Now, we know from other research that people are influenced when they see characters similar to them modeling healthy or unhealthy behaviors. So, when viewers see characters eating unhealthy food more often than they're eating healthy food, those viewers may be more likely to pick up unhealthy eating habits. But there's an interesting difference when you compare the food in dramas and the food in comedies. There's a bigger difference between the food we see and the food that actors eat in comedies than there are in dramas. Comedies are about 2.5 times more likely to show characters eating sweets than to show characters eating fruits and vegetables. So what's the lesson here? Here's my interpretation. When someone tells you to eat your vegetables, funny writers think it's funny when you say no. So that's one piece of our research. And I want to ask you all, well, let me start with Sherry, because I talked about sugar and sugary and desserts, and you are the queen of sugar and desserts.
How dare you?
Do you think that sugar is getting a bad rap?
Yes, because everything in moderation. I mean, there's nothing sexier than beautiful gelato, right? And so why not? It's decadent, and it just should be done in moderation. I think in America we've, can I say the word bastardized and made giant cakes and things, desserts that way. And we've been programmed that way. But you don't have to. You come to Italy and there's a beautiful little gelato. You need 8 bites and you're fine. It should satiate. You shouldn't sugarize.
Only
8? Okay. Well, if you get 2 scoops, then you can get 2 things. Yeah.
So you think that our portion sizes are too large?
Yeah. Yes. Overall, yes. More doesn't equal, quality, not quantity.
There is some evidence that our brains are wired to become addicted to sugar.
Absolutely. I have a friend, Emily Lucchetti, and she's very active in the Beard Foundation as well, and she has a cause called Dessert Worthy. Why just put a piece of cake in your mouth? It better be the best cake you'll ever have. So, save up that decadence for that one shot rather than to just eat without thinking. I think that's a big problem as well. I mean, I watched all these clips, and just the way he sliced the garlic, so sexy and so pretty, and the time that it takes to do that. If you have to think when you eat, I think that's very important.
And Norman or Phil, when you're doing a scene that involves food, I mean, the tofu turkey is all about that, but in a scene that's not about the food, when they could be eating anything, does it ever matter to you what they're eating? Do you think about that?
Yeah, once in a while, yeah, because you have a choice to make. If somebody's absent-mindedly eating at the table, we purposely would put fruit on the table and make that, because we knew people were watching. And it sends a subliminal message, right? Other times it was appropriate for somebody, one of the characters, to eat bad food, potato chips, cheese doodles, you know, and because there was a joke about it, or we were commenting about it. But yes, no, we took the responsibility of being on television seriously.
That's exactly the theme we are pursuing today. And Norman, in your shows, when people ate things, were there choices? Did you think about the choices that writers were making?
I truly don't remember that. We were thinking about what they were arguing about. I mean, there were, the concern was the issue of the episode. If it was, well, there was a wonderful scene I wish you'd shown. I've just reminded myself when Edith was suffering in All in the Family, menopause, and she was eating, and Archie said, well, this is your change of life? He was furious at her. This is your change of life? Well, you give you 30 seconds, change! And she was swallowing some. She was eating a great deal because she was going through that.
There's a great shot of you with the cast of Mortal Moment. So a moment ago, Norman, you spoke about Phil's new show, and what I'd like to do is show the teaser reel that gives an overview of I'll Have What Phil's Having.
There were things I never tasted growing up, like food with any flavor. In our house, meat was a punishment. When I went into the real world, I was like a man coming out of the desert. Then I started writing comedy and traveling to other lands to eat. The world can be a beautiful, delicious, and friendly place when we travel and eat great food together. I'm Phil Rosenthal, and I'm here to see and eat most of it, and to say to you, come on, you can have what I'm having. Hey! I got here yesterday, and I gotta tell you, I don't see it. I don't get it. Look how crazy huge this place is. But I'm here, so I'm gonna jump in. Tokyo introduced me to the first meal that actually spoke back to me. I'm hearing birds chirping and a stream running and leaves rustling. What is happening?
The live feed of the forest.
This is a live feed from the forest through the internet into a speaker in the wood. I have to die now. What? It all doesn't mean much if the food then is not delicious, right? But then it is. This is not my life. This is too cool for me. Not only does this city never sleep, it really knows how to eat. It's a search for the best tapas. That's one of the most delicious things I ever ate in my life. And one of nature's greatest gifts, jamon. You're my favorite person. All right, who wants some pig? You want a piece? I cut it myself.
Me too.
Yeah, special today. Thank you. 2 we take. Yes. Wow. I'm gonna have fond memories of Barcelona for the rest of my life. The jamon will last about a week and a half. Now, you'll see in your travels that not every bite's gonna be delicious. For instance, you ever have something called a century-year-old egg?
You can eat the whole thing.
Yeah, see?
YOLO.
It just has like a weird aftertaste.
Drink the beer.
Let me Google
Somebody
it.
call a doctor.
I'm gonna Google it.
Now we Google it? After? After Hong Kong, I was happy to come home to Los Angeles, where I tried to turn some of my old friends onto some of LA's newest and hottest foods. Wowie, wow, wow.
He's the taco whisperer.
I'm kind of in love with Bill.
What kind of food are we gonna eat?
Here's my friend Martin Short finding out I'm taking him to Roy Choi's great new Korean restaurant.
Isn't
try
that
it.
sauce amazing?
Yes. I also showed actor Paul Reiser and television legend Norman Lear the best pastrami sandwich in America.
The world holds its breath. I'll have the tuna.
It all boils down to this.
Look out, French people.
Food, travel, and laughs. This is the good stuff.
Chocolate egg creams for everybody.
And you know what to order.
I'll have what Phil's having. Now, would someone tell me which one is Phil?
You can go now.
Hey! Fabulous, that's great.
So, you must be the luckiest man on earth.
I told my brother that I was getting this show on PBS, that I was going to get to travel the world and show people where to eat. And he said, really, what are you going to call the show? The Lucky Bastard? And I was going with that title for a while. And PBS, which is the public broadcasting system in America, said you can't say that on television. But my production company, credit at the end, is Lucky Bastard Productions. So, yeah.
And though that teaser did not include it, Italy is one of your episodes.
And I'm going to tell you something. Please don't tell the other countries. Italy is my favorite. Yeah. And I'm not just saying that. I've been to Italy many, many times. It's where I choose to go for vacation. It's where I love. I've explored many parts of the country, but this is my first time in Milan. So that's why I'm interested in where the best gelato is and why I'm going to ask you all later your favorite places to eat. Because maybe I'll come and do a segment here if I'm lucky enough. Yeah.
For a second season.
Absolutely.
Great. There was also a moment in there, the scene from Langer's Delicatessen.
That's right.
And we're going to look at that in a moment.
Oh, the bigger part of that scene.
The whole
with
scene.
Norman and me.
With Norman and you.
Okay.
So we have
With
that.
Norman and me, and baby makes three. We're happy in our blue heaven.
Yes. Baby in that scene was Paul Reiser.
But that was the perfect musical cue to introduce Josh. Josh, as you heard earlier, is interested in music and food and culture. And I've asked Josh to give us an understanding of the work that he's been doing. And I know from my own experience that every time Josh gets up and talks about what he's doing, I am so much more excited than before. So I'd like to invite Josh to take us on a tour of what you've been up to.
Excuse me.
Are you dancing?
I'm going to get up now.
Oh, okay, good.
I get the podium.
Wow.
I'm just saying. Hi, everybody. I'm going to try to keep this exciting. So for the past 2 years, I have been looking for stories about Los Angeles, the city that we all call home. And I've been looking for them in an unlikely place. That ended up in this book that I just wrote with a foreword by Chef Roy Choi, who you just saw in Phil's show, called To Live and Dine in LA, trying to look at the role of menus in the history of Los Angeles. And I started looking for these stories of Los Angeles in the vaults and the special collection archives of the Los Angeles Public Library. They've got over 13,000 restaurant menus that have been collected dating back to the 1870s. And like with many cities, food is a central element to the history of Los Angeles. This is the official crest of the city of Los Angeles, which you might notice has olives and oranges and grapes. And I know this might be sacrilegious to say, but LA used to be a capital of wine production in the 19th century in downtown Los Angeles, so much so that along with olives and grapes, we had along with olives and oranges, we had grapes in our city crest. So food has long been part of the identity of Los Angeles. And speaking of expos and World's Fairs, at the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, that is how Los Angeles represented itself to the world, as an elephant covered in almonds. That was our city. We were a food city. We were known, before oranges, as a city that was about the bounty of food and excess of food, a place you wanted to move to get healthy. If you were sick, you came to LA for the sunshine and the oranges. If you were cold, we would warm you up. we would take care of you with our bountiful Edenic food production. And this started being celebrated in Los Angeles on restaurant menus. This is from the 1890s. This is a Chamber of Commerce, an official city restaurant menu dinner, where every single dish was actually linked toward a moment of important local history. You had things like the filet of sole a la Redondo Beach Railway, or the champagne to the Chamber of Commerce, ice cream and cake a la Wilmington Transportation Company. Doesn't sound so appetizing, but they were trying to kind of sell the city through food. I think, like many people, perhaps, when I started thinking about menus, about what they said, I really thought of menus only in two ways. I would read menus as I was growing up and in my adult life to find out what was for dinner, but then how much would what's for dinner cost, right? These are the two main functions, I think, of a restaurant menu, of how we read it, very utilitarian. And what I started to realize is that restaurant menus go far beyond that, that they become what I started thinking about as urban texts or metropolitan texts, that they actually told you stories about how cities grow. They tell you about the evolution of Los Angeles, the changing map of Los Angeles. They also tell you about how visual elements were used to create stories and entertain us through visual storytelling. Here, a restaurant that began as an oyster cart on the streets of Los Angeles somehow becomes linked to the entire founding of the Western United States on the cover of the menu. A printing company called Lord Printing Company was the only printing company in the United States that only printed menus. It was all about visual design, how the design of menus could sell the stories that restaurants needed to tell. You can see there's boundless examples of visual design as a way of selling restaurants. This is one of the earliest Mexican restaurants in Los Angeles, where the entire menu was in the shape of a tamal. This is, I think, a kind of a favorite example. My grandfather was actually a waiter at this restaurant, Ollie Hammond's Steakhouse, which was one of the first menus to start the trend of picturing the food you were going to eat, so that allegedly these images of your dishes would encourage you to jump on a ham onto eggs, or a filet mignon, or a Chicago T-bone. One of my favorite visual examples in the LA menu archives are these really tiny miniature menus. These are very, very, very small menus, that many of which were designed to be sent as postcards after you would eat. So now we're all familiar. We Instagram, we take pictures of every one of our dishes, because apparently this is an innate human trait to want to share the thing we were about to eat or have just eaten, to brag to our friends. Instagram, social media did not invent this, I'm here to report. I don't know if Los Angeles invented it, but kind of sharing with your friends through postcards what you just ate goes back at least to the early 1900s. And there's a long tradition of this in Los Angeles with these tiny souvenir menus. The visual design of Chinese restaurants, we'll see a bit more in a second. Extravagant designs meant to attract visitors not only from local communities, but to get non-Chinese in Los Angeles to be attracted to this kind of romanticized world of Chinese opulence and excellence in food. Again, Roy Choi, who we just saw in Phil's show, I think of contemporary chefs, is doing some of the greatest work in how to use menus to tell stories. There's a lot to say here, but I'll just focus on the fact that he uses it really as a memoir, as an autobiographical text, to tell you about his roots as a Korean American and how that identity shapes the choices of what ends up on the menu that you're about to eat. This is one of my favorite examples of what menus can tell us about as social texts, issues around race and ethnicity. This is from the 1940s. This was a barbecue joint in a predominantly African-American neighborhood in Los Angeles that was printed on a Mexican bullfighting menu that contained, this is in the middle of World War II, that contained anti-Japanese propaganda on the top of the menu. Every defense stamp that you buy pays the postage to send a Jap to hell. Right? So that on one single simple document like a restaurant menu, you get stories of the changing demographics of neighborhoods, the collision between cultures, and information about how xenophobia and perceptions of so-called racial others at the time showed up on restaurant menus. Menus, of course, also tell you a lot about cultures in exile, immigrant cultures, longings for home. This is a restaurant that my grandfather, after working as a waiter for his entire life, ended up for just 3 years being part co-owner of a Hungarian restaurant on Fairfax Boulevard in Los Angeles. Fairfax Avenue. I'm going to be, my LA citizenship papers are going to be revoked. Fairfax Avenue in Los Angeles. And this menu is, I think, a great example of the way that menus can be time travel for populations to bring you back to a home that you miss. Menus also tell us about gender inequity and gender imbalance. In the United States in the early 1900s and the late 19th century, restaurants were gender segregated. Men and women could not freely eat together unless you were together. So women could not eat alone, and they had to eat behind curtains in restaurants in many cases. And this started a trend of women beginning to own their own restaurants, to create their own restaurant spaces, particularly in tea rooms across Los Angeles, like the TikTok Tea Room. These were restaurants that were owned by women, designed to look like Midwestern living rooms, domestic spaces that were safe for women. Another example of how gender separation would happen, you'd have a tavern for the men and a grill for the ladies. And the menus would reflect that difference between them. This is from 1915. Menus also tell us, in terms of the history of Los Angeles, about the rising popularity and role of the automobile in shaping the growth of the city. We are a car city. I'm sure those of you who either have learned a little bit about Los Angeles or visited Los Angeles know not only do we like to drive to places to eat, but we like to drive to places to eat and then eat in the cars that we drove there in. This seems to be a particular LA disease. Chefs know to cook food that is portable, that you can eat while driving. And drive-ins played a key role in the growth of the city westward out of downtown Los Angeles. And even then, you see on a drive-in, good food is good health. People were trying with these messages. One of the more famous drive-ins in Los Angeles history, particularly for its architecture, its mid-century architecture, was this one called the Witch Stand, which I'd always heard about, but finding this menu turned me on to a whole other history of this restaurant. This restaurant turned out to be the site in 1951 of one of the biggest racial protests in the history of Los Angeles, one of the very first sit-ins by African Americans in Los Angeles to protest segregation in restaurants. Up until the 1940s, the vast majority of LA restaurants were segregated toward African Americans, and a young black teenager in 1951, after being refused service, launched the biggest and most impactful protest about segregation in Los Angeles. So suddenly, menus, not just what to get for dinner, how much dinner cost, but become these vibrant historical texts that teach us about the long history, not just of food as community, but food as inequality and segregation. Numerous menus that caricatured African Americans in Los Angeles, using stereotypes of mammy figures, of Aunt Jemima figures, of recreating, going out of their way to recreate plantation-era images of slavery. These were white-owned restaurants that were selling, quote-unquote, black Southern food to predominantly white diners. This is a menu from one of the many black-owned restaurants in Los Angeles, the still longest-running black-owned restaurant in Los Angeles, the Golden Bird Fried Chicken chain, which still exists. One of many examples of how restaurants also tell that other story, how menus tell that other story, of how ethnic groups and minority groups in cities take control over their own restaurants and tell their own stories and create their own worlds. Mexican food in Los Angeles. There's no such thing as Los Angeles without Mexican food, and Mexican food menus tell similar stories of the complicated nature of ethnic representation, stereotypical images of Mexicans who are either always sleeping or smoking or welcoming you in a cartoonish way to have a margarita and guacamole on a Friday night. At the same time, many Mexican-owned restaurants would give you counter images of Mexican revolutionaries, Mexican freedom fighters, and menus become these key texts not just of stereotype, but of ethnic pride and ethnic ownership. I want to show you a brief clip that we did for the exhibit that Marty mentioned from a Mexican restaurant owner in Los Angeles, a Oaxacan restaurant called Guelaguetza. And I'll show you a short clip of her talking about the importance of food in the creation of immigrant community in LA.
Food is everything in your life. I mean, that's like the one thing you have to do every single day, is eat. People need access to this food, especially Oaxacan food. And I always think about the kids of immigrants that aren't able to go back to Oaxaca, or kids who were born here who didn't grow up with the flavors that I grew up with. For me, it's very important that generation is educated and knows about not only their food culture, but the rest of the culture that Oaxaca has for them. The history of Guelaguetza starts in 1994 when my dad moved from Oaxaca to LA. He knows he needs to make money for his family back in Oaxaca. He came across a big Oaxacan community. He's like, I'm gonna open up a restaurant and I'm gonna sell Oaxacan food. How hard could this really be? In the beginning, everybody told them that he was gonna fail. Everybody was like, how are you gonna sell them these things that people never heard about? You have to sell something else. Tacos or burritos at the very least. He's like, you know what? I'm not going to sell food to Americans. I'm only gonna sell food to Oaxacans.
That idea, I'm only going to sell food to Oaxacans, to my community, to shape the destiny and the memory of my own community, this is a common trait in Los Angeles. But I also want to point out this is a Oaxacan restaurant serving Oaxacans in the heart of Koreatown in Los Angeles. And that's also an LA story, that layering of communities, of immigrant experiences. So we've got tons of examples of particularly Chinese restaurant menus in Los Angeles that tell similar stories, like the Far East Cafe. Similar stories of non-Chinese restaurant owners who would use stereotypical images of the Chinese people on their restaurant menus. This is from Maxi's Singapore Spa from the 1930s. And I'd like to compare that image to images of Chinese restaurant owners who said, enough with those images, we're going to put our own images on our own restaurant menus. So that, again, menus become these key texts for the creation of ethnic pride and community. But they're also key devices for talking about many of the things that we've already heard about today, the relationship between Hollywood storytelling and food and eating in restaurants. And so much of the history of restaurants in Los Angeles are indeed linked to the growth of Hollywood as an industry. Without actors, celebrities, producers, and directors, there's a lot of restaurants that would never have been able to stay open, like the Brown Derby, one of the more famous early Hollywood restaurants. Of course, the related trend of Hollywood actors and celebrities opening their own restaurants and being very humble about their role in the restaurant, putting their picture on the cover of their menu. Musso and Frank's, a legendary classic Hollywood restaurant, actually the very first restaurant in Hollywood. When they opened, it was the first restaurant to move away from downtown as the center of culinary culture in Los Angeles. And Orson Welles famously said that eating at Musso and Frank's was like visiting the womb. That it was a place that held that much power for him. Many screenwriters, Raymond Chandler, wrote some of their best film work and some of their best novels sitting in Musso and Frank's delicious leather booths. Legendary Hollywood haunts like the Coconut Grove at the Ambassador Hotel. Another legendary Hollywood haunt, Chasen's, some of you might have heard about, began as a small chili cart that became a kind of Hollywood playground, Hollywood club room, and also the site, I think, of everyone's bar mitzvah, perhaps up on this panel. Judy Garland was a Hollywood celebrity who played a large role in restaurant culture in Los Angeles. She was active during World War II with the Fred Harvey restaurant chain in bringing attention to the war effort. She also helped with her colleagues at Warner Brothers Studios to launch the Hollywood Canteen, which was a legendary Hollywood restaurant that for 2 years in the 1940s offered free food to men and women who were serving in the military service. And they would be served by Hollywood actors and celebrities and agents and studio chiefs who were their waiters. I think thankfully not their cooks, but their waiters who would serve them at the canteen. Many menus tried to brag about this. So this was for a restaurant called King's. Then on the back of it would tell you that you had to eat here because famous Hollywood actors already loved the food. Look what Rita Hayworth has said, or Walter Winchell, or Luella Parsons. They say it's good, it's got to be good. What the world-famous people are saying about us. This is one of my favorite Hollywood stories, a Hollywood haunt called Romanoff's, where just like Dean Martin, this is Mr. Romanoff himself, Mike Romanoff, total royalty, except that he was a pants presser from Brooklyn, Lithuania-born, who reinvented himself in the great Hollywood tradition in Los Angeles as royalty, and put himself on, with a crown and a scepter on the cover of his menus, and famously would keep seats open at his restaurant just in case celebrities would show up. So even if they didn't have reservations, he wouldn't let other people sit there because he wanted to make sure a celebrity had a spot. Hollywood folks had a key role in designing menus. One example among many, probably the most famous, would be Saul Bass, the legendary graphic artist who created famous posters and opening scene credits for Anatomy of a Murder, Otto Preminger films, for Hitchcock films, and did a lot of incredible work within Hollywood, but also designed the logo for Laurie's Prime Rib up top, and perhaps his least famous work of art, the Laurie's Doggy Bag. So from the Hollywood studios to the food that you take home, I guess to your pets, which is another maybe American thing. And then this brings us closer to the present day, the opening of a restaurant called Ma Maison that became another legendary Hollywood restaurant, in part funded by the great Gene Kelly. There's Wolfgang Puck there on your left, who Sherry worked with for many, many years. And Ma Maison became another kind of extension of Hollywood that not only invited celebrities to help fund, but also, of course, eat at the restaurant, but celebrity artists like David Hockney to actually paint the menus themselves. This is a David Hockney original that was painted for the restaurant. And this is one of many original artist works that were created for this restaurant. And Wolfgang Puck's experience at Ma Maison helped, I think, shape his relationship not only to incredible food, but his knack for nurturing conversations with Hollywood and Hollywood communities. We saw those great photos earlier of Oscar statuettes surrounded by food, so legendary post-Oscar parties at Spago. And this is a long history that these menus tell a number of different stories about. And so when we did design this exhibit, which is currently at the Central Library in downtown Los Angeles, we tried to channel that relationship between Hollywood storytelling, Hollywood spectacle, but also those important stories about community and politics that I mentioned earlier. And we created this exhibit which invites people to sit down and be a part of these living stories. But it's an exhibit where there's a saying that you see in a lot of in a lot of restaurants across the United States, where it says, we reserve the right to refuse service to anyone. So if a restaurant decides that they don't want to serve you because of how you're dressed, they have the right to do it. So we say we're going to turn that around, that we're going to reserve the right to refuse service to no one. That this is a vision for the kind of food culture that we're talking about here at World Expo, that food belongs to everyone, that restaurants have the power to be models of democracy, and that we should all be allowed a seat at the welcome table. And that the stories we tell about food should not just be determined by chefs, should not just be determined by those in the food industry, but determined by all of us. So in the exhibit, visitors have a chance to write their own menus that describe their Los Angeles, to tell their own stories about their own city. But in the great Hollywood tradition, just to end, I want to tell you that we turned all of these menus, all of these archives into a show. This wouldn't be an LA story without a good show. And we just recently had this big night at a historic old Hollywood theater in downtown Los Angeles, where we took these menus and brought them to life on stage. And we had a DJ on stage, there on the left, at the same time that Roy Choi was on stage with his team cooking. So all night long, for almost 3 hours, you had a DJ cutting up music, and you had Roy and his cooks cutting up and preparing food. We had special guests, like this guy you might recognize here, Norman Lear, talking about his work with Evan Kleiman, a very important food journalist and radio reporter in Los Angeles. But it ended, and I want to show you a clip of how the night ended, with a guy named Supernatural. Supernatural is the most legendary hip-hop MC, most legendary rapper in the world, who is known for freestyling, which is the hip-hop version of jazz improvisation. Supernatural never works from a script. He doesn't write out what he's going to rap. He waits to be inspired by his audience, and he creates on the spot. So we figured, how fitting if Roy Choi, cooking all night long, would at the end of the night give Supernatural some food ingredients and give him some finished dishes, and what would this rapper do with that food?
You want to cook with me? Yeah, I'm going to give you one shot. Let's go. Listen. Hey. 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 Let me hear you say Super. Say Super. Say Super. Natural. Now when you see that, I see it's a freestyle for me. Oh boy, now I'm cooking with my boy Joy. Hey, grab the beats and the sounds on Mars. What you wanna make today? Yo, with this squash, anything that you take. Yo, brother, do something. Chop the squash up and mix it with the onion. Hey, that's right. Yo, we start to panic. He gave me a tomato with grown organic. Listen, this the way I feel it when I feel it. Told you, that's just fabricated acrylic. Hey, I tell you what, now I'm doing errors. And when I spit, my style is 24 karat. Everybody right now, please rock to me. Every time that I spit, yo, I'm like that. You can find Super Mac with a mushroom cap. Hey, I'm on that. Black, they gotta know. I'm nice with the rhythm, I'm a scene with the flow. Hey, everybody, yeah, we gon' step it. Look at the blue show on that green leaf lettuce. Every time we go get it. Every time that I spit it, it's so copacetic. Energetic, yeah, brother, get it together. Supernatural hotter than pomato peppers. Hey, that's right, yeah, so ingredient. This is the way you rock it with all the ingredients. It's so hot, brother, it's so hot. Yeah, we start the dance on that purple eggplant.
What Supernatural achieved that night, I think, was a testament to the power of food, the testament of restaurants, the testament of restaurant menus, and a testament to all the work that's been done here around food at World Expo, which is that food is about communion. And I wanted to end today with a quote from the great Los Angeles food writer who decided to become a food writer while reading recipe books in the archives of the Central Library in downtown Los Angeles, the great MFK Fisher, who said that there is communion of more than our bodies when bread is broken and wine drunk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Josh. That was terrific. And at a moment in there, you talked about Spago and people investing in Spago. And Phil, you are an investor in restaurants. Are you in it for the money?
Well, that would be stupid. It's like as dumb as investing in a Broadway show or a boat, you know. But I do it because I believe that great cooking, great chefs, these are artists, and it's an art form, and our sense of taste is no less important than our sense of sight or hearing. So we support the symphony, we support the art galleries. I'm supporting the arts by investing in restaurants and in the people who make restaurants in our community, and I truly believe that, you know, it's my little way of trying to make my community and the world at large better. And so that's why I do it, and I love it. I love it. I wouldn't. It's almost it's selfish in a way too, because I want to live in that world, right? I want to eat in that world.
I eat with him in that world.
Yeah,
it's great.
And I invite you to come and eat with me in that world.
I want to also point out that Phil has told me now twice that even though he invests in restaurants, he often cannot get tables at them.
Listen, if I'm an investor in the restaurant and they say we can't get you in tonight, I'm like, good. Good, that's good for everybody. But I love something you said, or that our friend said from Guelaguetza.
Yeah.
How her dad said, I'm cooking for Oaxacans. I don't think he meant, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm only cooking for Oaxacans. Yeah. He meant, I'm cooking the food that I know for my people. All, of course, are welcome.
Of course.
But isn't it interesting? And have you been to Guelaguetza? It's fantastic, right? So this is a lesson that you can take in any aspect of your life, and I took it as a writer of sitcoms, right? If you try to write and hit everybody, write vaguely so that there's nothing specific and you hit everybody, right? You miss everybody. That's right. Because our lives deal in specifics. And we relate to each other through specifics. So even though your specific isn't my specific, I'm relating to it because it's a specific. Right. And I understand specifics. So I tried to write what I know about my specific family and the specific things that happened in that family. Same with the chef from Oaxaca, who was going to do Oaxacan food expertly and specifically. And of course, when we go, we find it delicious because it's not bland or vague. Right. It's spot on, laser beam. This is Oaxacan food.
And I think an interesting footnote to that, I think wonderful explanation, is that that restaurant, which began, as an immigrant enterprise of her dad starting to sell on the street, and he then turned it into this very successful restaurant, is that they just won the James Beard American Classic Award. Yes. American Classic Award. So a specific Mexican, regional Mexican immigrant story becomes awarded as an American classic, and her father, when he gave the James Beard speech, her father doesn't speak English, and he's actually since moved back to Oaxaca, he no longer lives in America. And he was the first, it was the first ever James Beard speech for an American restaurant delivered in Spanish. And I think it preserves that idea of the importance of the specific and the particular and the singular as a gateway to the universal. So
Norman said a moment ago that he loves being in your world and eating with you. We have a moment of that, a scene from I'll Have What Phil's Having, set in a restaurant you're not an investor in, but which features prominently in your series. Could we see that scene?
And then we really should eat.
The reason I wanted to take you here is because this is the best pastrami sandwich in America. There's one number you have to know. It's number 19. Number 19. It's the pastrami Swiss coleslaw Russian dressing on the best rye bread in America sandwich. There's only one thing you have to know. It's number 19.
Maybe I'm going to go different.
That's what my driver said. The driver, the guy who's driving me here, he says, they'll love you if you say number 19.
Is that right? Now, I'm going to be honest with you.
You don't want it.
I'll just have some Jell-O. I believe, maybe I'm wrong, that Swiss cheese fights the pastrami.
You would think that. You'd be wrong.
Swiss cheese on pastrami? It's Langer's. It's not New York.
What are you doing?
It's the best.
Listen, I'll get one. And if you want to bite, you don't have to commit.
I'll have a number 19.
Me too, because I don't like to make trouble like some people.
I just want a regular pastrami sandwich. And the Swiss cheese that comes on a 19, I'd like you to take my cheese and shove it up his. Is that all right? Okay.
The whole thesis of this episode is that Los Angeles, at the moment, is the... my flight is... Wow! Wow!
I feel less good about myself somehow.
Where is it?
You're not so special. The comedy today isn't limited to just the three of us. The owner of Langer's, Norman Langer, he stops by to say hello.
Have you been here since day one?
I got here this morning at 9.
No, I meant...
But all kidding stops when the sandwiches get here.
Oh! Whoa! Is this salad? I'm told to eat salad. Is that salad?
It's yellow. It's yellow salad.
I know. The world holds its breath.
As good as that.
I'll have the tuna. That's unbelievable.
How about that? Did you get a little crispy on the side?
I got the crispy on the side. You got the soft, like a baby's butt.
Yes.
But then suddenly meat.
Your metaphors are curious, but it is delicious. Listen, half of a sandwich's value is the bread. This is something we take for granted. It's not just what's in the sandwich. The bread is half the sandwich. Tell us the secret of the rye bread.
to the 1940s, before my dad opened here, he opened a deli in Palm Springs. And there was no Jewish bakeries in Palm Springs. So he commissioned a bakery here in Los Angeles to make rye bread for him. And it was brought to Palm Springs every day by Greyhound bus. My dad had to find a way to rejuvenate the bread, because it was day old by the time he served it to everyone.
Right.
So he created a process of rebaking the bread.
Which comes twice baked. That's
Double
where that
baked,
comes
but
from.
in essence, it's only 80% finished at the bakery.
I see.
So you get to tell them, don't cook it all the way.
Exactly. Yeah. This is not just, I'm not just saying this because the man is sitting here. This is not just the best pastrami sandwich that I've had. This is one of the best sandwiches anywhere in the world.
Thank you so much.
So nice.
Yeah. That's an unbelievable sandwich.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Damn, that's good.
Very good.
I don't care what anybody says.
It's fantastic.
I think this is terrific.
Now I'm hungry.
So I know you're hungry, and all this food talk makes us hungry, and we're heading toward that moment when we all get to go eat. Just a couple things, and then it's pranzo. I wanted to tell you about another piece of research that we've done. Recently, we did some research about how audiences are affected by news about food and nutrition. I don't know if you know The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. If you don't know that show, I bet you know Striscia la Notizia, which has often been compared to The Daily Show. Jon Stewart hosted The Daily Show for over 16 years. All that time, he insisted that The Daily Show is fake news. But I think of it as real news delivered through entertainment, through satire. Imagine a news story about food. Would it make a difference whether you encounter that story in traditional news or in satire? Would it make a difference to the information you learn from that story? Would it make a difference to how you feel about the story? Would it affect your behavior differently? That's what we wanted to know. So we recruited 1,600 people to help us do an experiment. We randomly divided them into 4 groups. One group saw a story about food on The Daily Show. Here is part of what they saw.
As many of us know, the typical American diet is rich in essential poisons. As evidence mounts that big agra and the food lobby have turned our food supply into an addictive, fattening death menu of artificial chemicals, antibiotics, and Cool Ranch carcinogens. The question is, now that we have this knowledge, now that the American people are aware of this, what are food companies going to do about it?
Little Caesars created the new bacon-wrapped deep dish pizza topped with pepperoni and bacon and wrapped in over 3.5 feet of bacon.
It appears they're going to say, F you anyway. While some establishments are giving our obesity crisis a chubby middle finger, others are more conflicted about their role. Here's McDonald's in January.
All vegetarians, foodies, and gastronauts, kindly avert your eyes. You can't get juiciness like this from soy or quinoa. This is not Greek yogurt, nor will that ever be kale.
But then in March, McDonald's does this.
McDonald's trying to offer healthier fare to its customers. And last week, executives announced that U.S. restaurants will stop selling chicken raised with antibiotics over the next 2 years.
Chicken without antibiotics? Well, now I'm conflicted. I want healthier food, but I'll miss treating my ear infections with the Buffalo Ranch McChicken. So what if a company wants the positive PR of going healthy, but doesn't want the hassle of actually improving the product? Well, there's a solution for them, too.
We do want to move now to a new Kids Eat Right label that will soon be appearing on Kraft singles from the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics.
Why? Here's how you know Kraft has not changed their ingredients. Kraft is still not legally allowed to call this product cheese. How, you might wonder, did Kraft Singles manage to wrangle a Kids Eat Right label?
The Academy has a program called Kids Eat Right. They entered into an agreement with Kraft, where Kraft is helping support this. They're giving money to the Academy to support this program. In exchange, they get to put this label on their product.
So Kraft is paying the Academy.
That sounds reasonable. Turns out the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics is an academy in the same way this is cheese.
So, another group saw the same information, but in traditional TV news, no satire. A third group saw the same information, but in a typical newspaper story, no satire. The fourth group was the control. We didn't show them any stories. Then we asked all 1,600 people to answer some questions to find out whether there were differences in what they learned, in what their attitudes were, and in whether they intended to change their behavior. We're still analyzing the data. In absolute terms, some of these that I'm going to describe are small differences. But when you consider that up to 2 million people watch The Daily Show, even small changes can translate into a major impact. Here are some highlights of what we found so far. We asked everyone, how did Kraft Singles get the Kids Eat Right label? The answer, of course, is that Kraft gave money to support the Kids Eat Right program. About 1/3 of the people in the control group got it right. Remember, they saw nothing, so either they guessed correctly or they already knew the answer. People who read the print story and people who saw the regular news, about 2/3 of them got it right. But almost 80% of the Daily Show viewers got it right. What about attitudes? In particular, what about cynicism? We wanted to know how cynical people were about the food industry. Here's what we found. People who saw The Daily Show were more cynical about the food industry than people who saw other news stories or saw nothing. But here's something interesting about that cynicism. We asked people if they agreed with statements like, there's very little we as a society can do to fight back against food industry practices we oppose, or it's hopeless to try to change the food industry, they're just too powerful. What we found was that cynicism did not necessarily lead to feeling helpless or hopeless. People who saw The Daily Show may have been more cynical, but for some of them, The Daily Show video made them feel more optimistic about changing the food industry. Maybe cynicism can be a good thing. It can even inspire you to change what you're cynical about. 1 month later, we wanted to see if the kind of food news that people saw correlated with any changes in what they ate. Here's what we found. A month later, people who saw The Daily Show or the TV news were eating fruits and vegetables more often than people who saw the newspaper story. So, people who saw satirical news remembered more information about the food industry, became more cynical about the food industry, in some cases felt less hopeless about the potential for change in the food industry, and a month later, they were eating more fruits and vegetables. You can find out more about all of this on our website. And to close, I would just like, per dolce, to ask Josh to introduce a special treat for all of us as a finale for this evening. It feels like this evening already, doesn't it?
I'm going to stay seated.
Yes.
When we were trying to figure out how do we close this, we decided that we would love to figure out a way to have food and restaurants and all of the topics we've been talking about today come to life in one of the most glorious human expressions on the planet, one that has great meaning to you in Italy, but especially to you here in Milan. In LA, we have a restaurant called La Scala. Here you have La Scala. And so we decided, wouldn't it be great to have an opera singer join us today? She was born in Boston, but she calls Milan home, made her debut in La Bohème alongside a little singer named Pavarotti, and has gone on to sing at opera houses around the world under the baton of conductors, some of the greatest conductors around the world. We are still shocked she agreed to join us today. Please give an incredible warm welcome to Madeleine René.
Working? Yes, thank you very much, Josh. And I wanted to thank Jerry Jaquinta and I should say the people know who they are that I want to thank, but the Annenberg School for inviting me today. Okay, I feel like I should be singing what I'm about to say, but I've prepared just a little talk about food and opera and why the two are so closely intertwined, which I think they are, okay? And let's start with a very basic fact, that singing comes out of the mouth and food goes into the mouth. So they already have a lot in common in that sense. They're both very pleasurable activities. And as you know, a lot of singers after singing, you know, it's a huge output when you sing. It's if you do that for 2 hours, it makes you hungry. So then you want to refuel. And if your body is your instrument, you want to pamper it. And what better way to pamper your body than to give it lots of good things to eat? So that explains why most opera singers have enormous girths. But we all know that food plays an important role in any culture. But to Italians, food and opera are a source of national pride. They're also two of Italy's best exports all over the world. And in a time where there was no global communications, opera went all the way across the Atlantic, went down to South America. I mean, it's traveled a lot. Italy can also boast many famous conductors: Donizetti, Bellini, Puccini, Verdi, Mascagni, Leoncavallo, etc., etc. And Rossini, who was quite a foodie himself, and loved the fact that he was a great chef, and invented something called tournedos Rossini. Has anybody heard of tournedos Rossini? Okay, it's like a heart attack on a plate. I mean, it is the cholesterol special of all times. It's, you know, filet wrapped in bacon with foie gras on top. There's also other dishes named for musicians and even famous sopranos like Nellie Melba, the Australian soprano, Peach Melba, which is one of the most famous desserts. But the real link between opera and food is that opera is about life. And even if today we have cyberspace, computers, television, cell phones, and satellites, we're technologically involved. I'm sorry, I wrote really big so that I wouldn't have to use my glasses, but I may have to put them on anyway. Okay, man's emotional makeup today is no different than it was in biblical times or Shakespearean times. And Mozart's audiences in 786, when they went to the opera, they were watching the equivalent of what would be today's modern soap opera or movie. The Marriage of Figaro is the story of a countess that worries about her husband's philanderings with a younger woman who happens to work for him. So love, hate, jealousy, anger, vendetta, compassion, and lots of passion in general, which is the stuff that opera is made out of, is a testimony to the fact that opera celebrates appetites. So how can food not be a part of this? Most operas have eating scenes, or they talk about food in some great detail. Eating is a form of celebration that brings people together. So it generally has a joyous connotation to it. Unless you're watching Verdi's Macbeth or his Simon Boccanegra, where somebody's about to get poisoned at the dinner table, it means that people are happy and nothing bad is going to happen just yet. So opera is filled with eating scenes, parties. When Verdi's La Traviata opens, Violetta is giving a party and everyone is toasting with champagne, and they sing the famous Libiamo. Have anybody here heard of Libiamo? Hang on a second, I'll sing it. I'll start off at least in the right key. Libiamo, libiamo, degli corici, che la bellezza infiora, e là fuggevo, fuggevo l'ora, s'inebria voluta. Okay, that gives you the idea of what Traviata is about. Thank you. Anyway, Verdi's opera Falstaff opens at a local pub called the Garter Inn, where there are beer bottles all over the place from the night before. It's very, you know, décontracté, as they say in French. But in a recent production at the Metropolitan Opera, Falstaff sang his big second act aria while he was carving an enormous turkey in a kitchen. So Falstaff's appetite for food and for life are as enormous as his waistline. In the opera La Bohème, which Josh mentioned was my debut opera, which it was, it's about a bunch of, you know, starving musicians, starving writers, starving artists, that on Christmas Eve they decide they're not going to eat the paltry salami and herring that they've been saving up, but they head for the Café Momus in the Latin Quarter of Paris. And at that point, the stage becomes a marketplace where peddlers are selling everything from oranges, dates, chestnuts, tarts, coconut milk, I'm quoting the libretto, candies, and prunes from Tours. So, if you're used to sun-sweet prunes from California, you probably didn't consider that to Puccini, the best prunes came from Tours, France. It's not that I'm personally into prunes, but since Puccini mentioned them, I was curious, so I went online and I Googled Prugne di Tours, and I found out, you might be interested in this, that they stuffed the prunes with rum puree or with pale greened almond paste and a little kirsch. So, no wonder why prunes were popular back then, but I'm digressing. The Bohemians go to the Café Momus and they order venison, turkey, chicken, lobster, and they drink wine from the Rhine region. That's a tongue twister, wine, okay. But people ask me all the time, do you really drink wine on stage? And some people do, but I don't like to drink real wine on stage because singing is an athletic activity and it requires great concentration, so you really have to stay focused, and you can't, it's like driving or something. So plus when you're singing, it's not the moment to have food or drink in your mouth. I remember doing a production of Traviata in San Francisco years ago, where I was so nervous when everybody left the room, you know, to leave the party, and I knew my big aria was coming up. I took a drink, and of course it went down the wrong way, and it was terrible. I was panicked. So when you're on stage, you have to fake chewing, preferably with your mouth closed, or eat prop food, which you never know how that's going to end up either. But anyway, opera loves food and drink, mostly drink. There are a lot of references to drinking in operas. In Madama Butterfly, which is set in Japan, they toast the new bride, Cho-Cho-san, with rice wine, which we all know is sake. And of course, if you want sweets, cookies, gingerbread, raisins, almonds, Humperdinck wrote all about that in Hansel and Gretel. And if you read the libretto, you're going to be racing to the refrigerator for a glass of milk. Wine, chocolate, coffee, which is another great Italian staple and love. Their coffee over here is amazing. Sorry to say that when I know that Starbucks has not made it to Italy yet, unless I'm wrong about that. But anyway, coffee is present in most operas, wine for sure, and the Italian, and there's sorbetti, which is the Italian version of ice cream without the cream. You can get that at Massimo too. And confetti, which are sugar-covered almonds that in Italy are eaten for weddings. In fact, in Mozart's Don Giovanni, he promises confetti e sorbetti to all the peasants at the wedding party. That way he can lure Zerlina off into the bushes alone. However, one of the most memorable opera eating scenes, as far as I'm concerned, and my favorite role, which is Tosca, is when the curtain opens in Act 2 of the opera Tosca, Puccini's opera, and Baron Scarpia is dining in his office at the Palazzo Farnese in Rome. He's the chief of police, and he's probably dining on goat cheese, caciocavallo, or something like that, and roast wild boar. And his dinner is interrupted because his henchmen bring in the tenor Cavaradossi to be interrogated and subsequently tortured. Tosca arrives and she begs for her lover's life, and Scarpia invites her to dinner, and he offers her a glass of wine from Spain, e vin di Spagna, and she refuses, and then he chases her around the table. He's intent on, I'll say, seducing her, to put it nicely. However, Tosca picks up the dinner knife off the table and stabs Scarpia to death. So, talk about not even getting to your dessert course. Anyway, on that note, pun intended, I intend to conclude by singing one of my favorite operas from an aria called Carmen. And when I talked to Josh about, you know, what we were going to do, because I was asked if I would talk about food and maybe sing a menu, so I made up my own menu of some of my favorite foods, but, and I'm going to sing that menu to you now. But I wouldn't really eat all those things together, because then I would end up looking like Phil will if he keeps eating all that delicious food and those pastrami sandwiches. So, I started on the right note here. The tune is habanera. I'll stand back. Melanzane alla parmigiana, tagliolini con il ragù, bucatini alla matriciana, tortellini e poi nulla più, cotoletta alla milanese, fritto misto alla livornese, 2 porcini ben trifolati, pomodori gratinati. Amor, amor, color, sapor della cipolla rosolata, un po' di rucola nell'insalata, i gamberetti in salsa rosa, un'oratina assai gustosa, pa pam pam pam, tiramisù, tartufo nero o la panna cotta, pa pam pam pam, e per finire, sai come ci vuole un bel caffè, pa pam pam pam. Thank you very much. Thank you,
Thank you, Madeline Renee. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, audience. Grazie tutte e buon appetito. Appetito. Buon appetito.